Welcome to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
This is episode 185. Getting closer every episode to that 200 episode mark. Looking forward to that. We should break into that early in 2025.
Wow. That means 2024 is almost over. I can't believe it.
Getting down there towards the end of the year. You know what that means? Christmas episode and best of the year episode are coming up soon.
I already have a potential Christmas episode I could do, but there will be more Christmas releases by then, so I might change it. But there are already enough classical Christmas releases out that I could actually program it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Not much in jazz yet. I'm looking forward to something really swinging or something a little bit strange.
Yeah, I got some good stuff. We'll see. Maybe some big surprise will happen, you know.
Yeah, you never know. Before we get into new information from last week's episode, I'm going to give a big thanks to Swiss trumpeter Matthew Spillman for sharing our episode on Facebook. I think he was a little bit scared of our logo, Mike.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, he said, adult music, it's not what you think. Well, what did you think?
I can tell you, though, that we have business cards with that logo on it, and I gave it to a friend, and he said that he wasn't sure he wanted his wife to see it.
Maybe that's our problem.
Maybe that's why we're wallowing in obscurity. People think we're seedy or something. I think it's a sharp-looking logo. I really like it.
I think it's good, too.
Yeah, it stands out. It's really what you want.
Other good news coming up before Christmas and end of the year. In 2 weeks, we've got something set up with our friend Jason Kaiser, great guitarist, who lives in two worlds, really, of acoustic music, kind of all things folk, and then in the jazz world. And he's got his new album coming out on OA2 Records, Kind of Kenny, a tribute to the music of trumpeter Kenny Wheeler. A couple original pieces on there. We've got our copies of that, and I've been listening to that really interesting instrumentation. And so Jason's going to come on, and we're going to talk through the album with him, and that'll be coming up at the end of the month. So stay tuned for that. We'll give you more details as that comes along.
Yeah, I kind of like having him on again, because last time he was on, he was really insightful. He has good ears, you know. He kind of had a good sense of, you know, musicality. He can even talk about it, not just play. It was pretty impressive.
So it'll be interesting to get his perspective. And it's always fun to have a guest on with us. And that's all the good news. Unfortunately, Mike, I can't get away from this piano.
Yeah.
Every week I've got to get over to that.
Yeah, we've got a classical death this week. So here we go. Let's play the theme. Yeah, and unfortunately, this week I have to do the talking about the death of Finnish conductor and composer Leif Segerstam. He died at the age of 80 on October 9th in 2024, just in case people are listening to this episode years in the future. He had a really striking appearance in his later years, as both of us were commenting on. He grew a flowing white beard, and he had considerable girth to him, which made him look a bit like symphonic Santa Claus. And he certainly bestowed a lot of symphonies on the public over the years, just pouring out of his bag there. He's known for writing over 300 symphonies, and in March 2024, the number was 371.
Amazing.
Yeah, symphonies. Unbelievable.
Wow.
How do you program that? Gee, we're going to do his 189th symphony today. Well, why not the 188th? I would never be able to choose which one I'd want to do.
Yeah.
This, by the way, makes him the most prolific composer of symphonies in history, and that's really saying something, considering they had people like Telemann and the Baroque composers out there.
Yeah.
He's recorded some of them, too, if you want to hear them. They're available, I think, on the Beast label, but I'm not sure. It might be Ondine, too. Most of them consist of a single 20 to 30-minute movement, and many are written so they don't require a conductor, so I guess he's kind of thinking of practicality for orchestras. He gave a lot of those symphonies characterful titles, and the example that Gramophone's obituary writer James McCarthy pulled out was More Dreamings by Sophia, a Dog. And if anyone wants to hear that, it's Symphony 329. You want to dig that out. I don't think it's been recorded, though. Now, for us at Adult Music, Segerstam is chiefly known as a conductor, and he's known to us for his recordings of the symphonies of Eino Juhani Rautavaara on the Ondine label. And this is really where we fell in love with Rautavaara's music and Segerstam's conducting, too. His recordings of Rautavaara's Symphonies 7 and 8 are both just fantastic. They'll put you on a really good place, so I recommend those. Now, I've never seen him conduct, but he was also well known for his high energy during performances. He's said to have had a vibrant personality, and I certainly took to the recordings I've heard with him conducting on them, so I'm sorry to see him go. It would have been great to still be getting some recordings of him conducting, so rest in peace, Leif Segerstam.
Okay, then moving on to the new music for this episode. As always, in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all the music we'll discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. You can listen to the podcast on Deezer as well if you want to get everything in one place. Now, wherever you listen to us, we have a lot of information in our episode descriptions. You got all the links and information of the recordings, and in some places it all gets bunched up and squeezed together. If you can't see that or it's a little bit hard to follow, you can always come over to our host site, Podbean, that's podbean.com, where everything is easy to look at and easy to follow. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to us. Tell a music-loving friend or any musician friends. And if you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, it helps us get listed in the recommendations. We could use a couple more reviews over on the Apple Podcasts app. Doesn't cost anything, helps us out a lot. Also, come follow us on our Facebook page to get extra info and more new release information during the week. You can see our interaction with the artists. You can leave a message or comment there. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly by email, we'd love to hear from you. Any comments or questions, our address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We'll be playing musical samples of the 6 recordings that we're going to discuss in this episode, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services and the links provided. We also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. We're going to go way back in time for the start this week, and we're going to have some harpsichord, aren't we, Mike?
Yeah, harpsichord. The first album is called Domenico Scarlatti, A Man of Genius. How's that for modesty?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's by one of our favorite harpsichordists, Francesco Corti, and we did his recording of Italian harpsichord works last year. But this one's released on the Arcana label. It came out on September 27th, and it's an hour and a half long. It's a very long CD of single movement harpsichord sonatas by Scarlatti. Now, Scarlatti sonatas are pretty interesting and Francesco Corti actually pulls out something that I hadn't really thought of before. Now, all of the sonatas on this album are from the 18th century volumes today preserved in the Biblioteca Marciana of Venice and the Biblioteca Palatina of Parma. Now, listeners, that probably doesn't mean much to you. It doesn't really mean anything to me either, but the thing we want to take away from this is they're probably all written in around the same period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Both volumes date from 1752 to 1753, so the sonatas would have been written either around that time or maybe 10 years before or something like that. The sonatas mix serious styles with the buffo. They're refined with the folkish. This is almost like postmodern. As a result, the styles coexist in a form of ingenious jesting of great immediacy, according to Scarlatti himself. The sonatas are all programmed in pairs on this album, according to key, and that's true in the manuscripts as well. And the track list in the booklet reflects this, so those listening on streaming should keep this in mind. Like, you're going to hear 2 sonatas in the same key, or one will be in the major, one will be in the minor. But they're supposed to be heard in pairs, according to the program on this album. Each pair of sonatas reflects the binary ordering by key used in the manuscripts preserved in Venice and Parma. Now, Scarlatti was around at the same time as Bach. He's a Baroque-era composer. But he's not like Bach, for whom the opening material is the cell motive out of which the whole rest of the music flows coherently. Now, this became the ideal in music. Mozart and then Beethoven especially were kind of took to this. Like, Beethoven composed via motifs, and you would just build that motif into the whole movement. But for Scarlatti, and this is true of Boccherini too, the discrepancy between premise and development, between the exordium and the rest of the discourse, is a deliberate choice. Like, it doesn't all stem from the same seed, and a subject of special and insistent formal research. So this is different than Bach. A lot of surprises are in it.
Yes.
Bach will have some surprises too. The main booklet note is by Marco Moiraghi, who teaches history of music at the Conservatorio of Fermo, and the notes are insightful, so I'm going to quote liberally from them. So you want to keep in mind, a lot of these words are Marco Moiraghi's words. The harpsichordist Francesco Corti himself adds some personal reflections on Scarlatti's music, which are also well worth reading for the insights. These guys both do a lot for insights into Scarlatti's music. All right, now, this program doesn't feature any of the really famous sonatas by Scarlatti. Well, there are one or two that are kind of famous. But it's a really interesting program just by the way it's performed and by the way it's programmed. Let's start with the first track, Sonata K213 in D minor, Andante. So, the first and second tracks are going to be both D sonatas. One's in D minor, one's in D major. One is slow and one is fast. So we're going to get that slow-fast contrast here. The first track, the Andante Sonata, communicates reflective melancholy. So the pair, as I said, is slow-fast. It develops the idea of a calm introduction followed by a movement that is related, but much faster. Related by key, at least. The effect is that of a freeing energies previously kept in check. We hear this a lot in Mozart's later music, right? He would start with a slow introduction, and then like a spring has just been set off. The faster part will come in. I like the way Corti places the notes in space at the opening of this first track, like the piece is being thought up in the moment. And one of the things we love about Corti's playing is that he gives his playing a sense of spontaneity, even though he's playing from a score. He's really good at this, and the interpretation as a result sounds fresh. The sound on the recording is gorgeous, and the instrument itself has a tightly focused chiming sound. Let's hear this sample from the 30-second mark so we can hear some of Scarlatti's harmonic excursions. Yeah, a lot of teasing harmonies in there. Those arpeggiated figures, those are not your typical major-minor scales. It sounds like there's a lot of equal intervals so that we don't really know where it's going to stop, those minor sevenths and that sort of thing. Now, this sample doesn't really give us a sense of the overall tonal stability of the piece, though it does give us a sense of the melancholy of the tempo. For the most part, this piece is straightforwardly melodic, with some odd harmonies heard on occasion. We stay in the melancholy space for a while, and the sonata lasts just over 8 minutes, pretty long, and all the repeats are taken. So we get into the B section. It sounds like there's a third section beginning in the 6th minute, but I'm not so sure about that. Most of Scarlatti's sonatas go A-B. That was like the norm in the Baroque era. The section ends as the B section did with descending figures. Then we get to track 2, Sonata K214 in D major. Allegro vivo. This is a joyous dance, also minor to major in this pair of works. Bright and sunny with sprung Italian-like rhythms, relying on a dotted rhythm. There are quick ornaments taken crisply by Corti. He gets a great sense of the work's dance quality. Let's get a sample. Kind of makes me think that 17th century Italy was a happening place. Although I have to say, although the theme is Italian, Scarlatti was living in Spain when he wrote all of these works, I think. This is a fantastically clear recording, too. Corti keeps the spirits high throughout this 3.5-minute work. Track 3, Sonata K208 in A major, Adagio e Cantabile. The expressive contrast is again found between these two works. There's Adagio, and the next one's going to be Allegro. Performers love this K208 in A major piece for its incomplete and at times tonally ambiguous harmonies. The fact that the harmony is sometimes hybrid and irregular makes it seem to combine irreconcilable tonal functions. It's a masterpiece of condensed expression. The bass has a pulsing repeated note at the beginning. The opening repeats at 1 minute and 15 seconds, this time with ornaments provided by Corti. The A section is pretty straightforward harmonically, and at 2:36 we hear the B section, and this goes right into some harmonic detours, so I want to start the sample there. Yeah, we don't even get the cadence there. He kind of pulls the rug out right at the end. Fantastic. And this is unusual for the Baroque, where you just have this extended, kind of harmony, and you don't really know where it's going. Notice also the rather melancholy strumming figure in the arpeggiated left hand. The pulsing bass note now has the quality of a guitar, as I said, being strummed with the chords above it. Track 4, Sonata K209 in A major, Allegro. This is a triple-time dance rhythm. The beginning is linear, simple, and almost naive sounding, while the continuation is full of unexpected twists and bizarre sonorities. How many times we heard this already in 4 tracks? There are tonal contortions that are fleeting, strange, and deliberate. Like the sonata on track 2, this one has a lively rhythm, if not as lively as that one. Corti adds some expressive slowings as he approaches certain harmonic markers. There are a few harmonic surprises in this work as well. We get a repeat of the opening A section at 1 minute and 15 seconds or so, and at 2 minutes and 32 seconds the B section starts, and at least in this section of works, the ending section seemed to be the most harmonically interesting. Let's hear a little bit of this. Corti really keeps the rhythmic quality of the work going as well, and that really makes these performances extra special. There's a sparkling approach to the section's final cadence, and then it repeats with ornaments. And this is something, I'm probably going to say this again later, but all of these sections repeat, but Corti is really creative in those repeated sections. Sometimes they're almost unidentifiable as a repeated section. It sounds like the section's been rewritten. He comes up with a lot of ornamental ideas that sort of disguise the original melody, although the harmony is all the same. Track 5, Sonata K248 in B-flat major, Allegro. So in these two pieces, the novelties of Scarlatti's compositional idiom are closely associated with the application of brilliant and diverse instrumental skills, based above all on leaps of the hands, so these are good pieces to watch the keyboardist play. Unusual, bold, and awkward leaps. The second half of the sonata especially displays these leaps, and the leaps act as details that help to reveal the broader overall design. Now, unfortunately, we can't see these on a recording, but if you play the piano or the keyboard or any keyboard instrument, you might be able to imagine where these are happening. Let's hear the opening of this track. man.
Whoa.
We just can't get that cadence, you know? It's coming and then, whoa, it's a little magic trick there. Pianists like to play this piece for the virtuosic skills required, which you can see but can't quite hear. It's fun to watch pianists play this. There's a big stylistic change in the middle of the A section, and the continuation of the material after cadences is surprising as well. We do get a repeat of the A section with some captivating ornamentation from Corti, especially near the cadence, and then the B section starts at around 2 minutes and 25 seconds and plays on the repeated chords we heard briefly in the opening section. There's a compelling repeated note over them that you'll have to listen for. It's impressive keyboard technique. The B section repeats at 3 minutes and 48 seconds if you're keeping score or trying to follow the form. Track 6, Sonata K249 in B-flat major, Allegro. Corti takes this as a slower allegro than the previous one. It features some rapid descending lines. The opening repeats at 1 minute and 5 seconds with some expressive hesitations added. Sometimes it's hard to identify that we're hearing a repeated section. Corti is so deft at changing his interpretation and providing ornaments that catch the ear. At 2 minutes and 9 seconds, the B section comes in, and we head into some sudden harmony and rhythm changes, making the material sound compellingly disjointed. Let's hear that. So it started slow and then fast and all this sort of thing happens. And you notice all the harmonic changes. If you're an amateur pianist, in order to put this piece across, you can't really just read it from the score. You have to have a good ear and head for harmony and sort of make sure that the listener kind of picks up all those odd changes. There are some clever extensions of the final cadence before the section is repeated at about 3 minutes and 35 seconds. Corti again providing interpretative changes, slowing certain passages and accenting different chords and notes in the figures. He has a lot of ideas. I really love this harpsichordist. Track 7, Sonata K215 in E major, Andante. So in this pair of works, tracks 7 and 8, the effect of a passage from calm to brilliance also comes with some significant surprises. The serene opening does not anticipate the tormented developments to come, above all in the second half of the piece, which is a tour de force of modulations made up of bold and unpredictable juxtapositions. This is a pretty long andante. It's 7 minutes and 40 seconds. It starts with some gorgeous glissando-like arpeggios on the opening chords, making the music sound strummed. By the 1 minute and 7 second mark, odd harmonic changes are already appearing. At 1 minute and 43, the opening section repeats, but again, in Corti's hands, they don't sound like repeats. At 3 minutes and 25 seconds, the B section starts, and boy, does it startle. It starts on a heavily accented bass note, and the harmonies are twisted indeed. I'm going to sample the enchanting close of the A section, followed by the beginning of the B section, so that you could hear how the switch from one section to the other happens. Those are some heavy, dark chords. It's like Beethoven took over at the harpsichord. Corti gives this a wandering, exploratory sense. The listener really has no idea where this is headed. So surprising is each new twist. And Corti is excellent at drawing this element of surprise out of the music. The section repeats at 5 minutes and 25 seconds, but again, Corti reinterprets it with new accents and other approaches, including a repeated note we hadn't heard before. I'm wondering if he added that or if it's new music. At the 6 minutes and 25 seconds, we hear something like a cadenza, which continues expressively until at 7:07, the chiming opening timbre of the harpsichord comes back and all is put right at the final cadence, though not without some light harmonic twists along the way. This is an amazing piece, track 7, so give that whole track a sample. Track 8, Sonata K216 in E major, Allegro. Corti takes this as a slower allegro, but it has a sunniness to it nevertheless. Scarlatti's writing in this piece is highly appealing, with Mozart-like harmonic surprises that delight rather than confound. Actually, they're Scarlatti-like surprises, but Mozart did something similar later on. Again, we're in expert hands with Corti as interpreter. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds or so, there are arpeggiated figures that are sequenced into some odd harmonic territory. At 3 minutes and 54 seconds, the B section repeats after a section-ending cadence. Let's hear some of the arpeggiated chords from this section. Wow. Some great harmonies in there. And then there was that surprise speedy ending to the cadence, going back to the odd harmonies again. Wow. A magical piece. Track 8. Listen to that one too. Actually, listen to that pair. They're supposed to be together on this recording. Track 9, Sonata K217 in A minor, Andante. This is a slow-fast pairing again. This in track 10. So track 9 starts fugally and becomes chordal and sectional. So this is odd too. Scarlatti isn't interested in the strict consistency of the counterpoint of the German school. Bach would have started as a fugue, and that's what you would get, a fugue. But here, no, it starts as a fugue and then there are chords. Scarlatti instead preferred to explore the subtle interplay of varying connections, juxtapositions, and harmonic contradictions. The opening fugue figure is highly ornamented with trills. By the 45-second mark, there's a straight theme with arpeggiated strum-like chords accompanying, and we now seem to be in a sort of theme and variations where the theme is presented with different accompaniments, all creative, especially with the sense of spontaneity that Corti brings to them when they appear. At 2 minutes and 36 seconds, we get a repeat of the opening section. The end of this section seems to have been given heightened sensitivity by Corti, so I want to hear this. Actually got a bit of a full cadence there, except that the music kept going. At 5 minutes, the even slower B section begins with quarter note rolled chords setting the pace. Faster figuration threatens to take over at 5:53, but Scarlatti once again is teasing the listener. The section ends calmly and is repeated at 8 minutes and 13 seconds with a bit of subtle urgency added to the attack and some isolated dissonant notes singled out by giving them space. The ending is taken with a subtle slowing. Track 10, K218 in A minor, Vivo. The 11-minute-long slow previous track, K217, is here contrasted with a fast 2.5-minute-long quick sonata, with a lot of activity in the accompaniment as the piece rushes along. Corti is playful in this piece, playing repeated lines in a teasingly more heavily accented way that bring a smile. Track 11, Sonata K242 in C major, Vivo. Both this and the next pair feature individual harmonic experimentation, which is also based on Scarlatti's attention to and personal re-elaboration of the music from the Spanish folk tradition. Most of these sonatas, as I said, were composed in Spain. There are odd harmonies combined with odd rhythmic choices in the middle section of this particular sonata. The sonata has a cheerful, upbeat opening and continues with that energy despite the twists and turns of the harmony, which begin about 25 seconds into the piece. Let's hear the entire A section. Then we get a repeat of that entire section. Some great harmonic changes in there. There's a dramatic pause taken on the repeat at 1 minute and 18 seconds, and I love Corti's various methods of surprising the listener in repeated sections by not playing them in quite the same way. I mentioned this before, but this happens throughout the album. The B section goes through some harmonic surprises in much the same way as the A section as it heads back to C major. Track 12, Sonata K243 in C major, Allegro. This is about the same tempo as the previous K242, but it has a lilting rhythm to it that gives it an elegant dance quality. We get that nice cadence at the end there. Again, we're given some new accents in the repeated A section, and the droning repeated chords, briefly suggesting the countryside, is accented here at about the 1 minute and 20 second mark. At 1 minute and 51, the B section comes in and the dance continues, though it takes us on a harmonic excursion. Overall, both of these sonatas are cheerful. Track 13, Sonata K244 in B major, Allegro. This starts with a muted tone from the harpsichord and a charming melodic line. We have to hear this. Just when the harmony was getting exciting, I fade out. You'll just have to go to the full track to hear where that goes. At 1 minute and 16 seconds, the opening repeats. At 2:41, new material in the B section begins, and we get a climbing line with fascinating harmonic changes that seem to get us deeper into the weeds, until there's a brief pause at 3:16, and the harmony begins to find its way back to B major. We then get a repeat of the B section with some subtle changes of approach. Track 14, Sonata K245 in B major, Allegro. This has an upbeat dance quality and the rhythm springs out of the instrument. Corti provides an excellent bounce to his playing. Corti also pulls the humor out of the work as well. Just in the way he phrases or the way he sets his tempo and the space he leaves between notes. It's pretty ingenious and really fun. The upbeat rhythm certainly does nothing to stop the harmonic byways explored in the B section. Corti does a bit of slowing to help them register with the listener. The piece retains its dancing quality throughout, however, and is particularly joyful with its quick trills in the last phrases. The final pair, track 15, Sonata K219 in A major, Andante. This pair again brings together contrasting tempos and characters. The sonata is Andante, but has some energy and flow to its rhythm. Quarter note accompaniment guides the first section. Harmony is leading somewhere and takes only slight detours. In the B section, the rhythm gets a bit more of a stately dance feel to it. And finally, track 16, Sonata K220 in A major, Allegro. Not a speedy Allegro, but nevertheless a giddy one due to its figuration. And again, we get those fantastic sudden harmonic changes. I remember playing one of these, not one of these, but a Scarlatti sonata for a friend. And when I got to one of the really strange harmonic changes, he actually yelled at me. He said, "No, it doesn't go like that." Well, it does. It was like just the fact that a Baroque composer had written that harmony, had changed his entire worldview, and now he had to rebuild it from nothing, you know? His whole musical understanding was changed. And Scarlatti has a way of doing that. There's some impressively quick figuration from Corti before the cadence ending the first section. The B section proceeds back to A major, much like the first departed from it, with similar figuration and quick scales right before the cadence. And that's the album. The performances on this recording all felt exhilaratingly fresh, and the playing made me smile. Francesco Corti is a very inventive harpsichordist. He sounds on top of each musical event, very present in his approach, and as a result, the performances have a sudden, off-the-cuff sense to them, like they're being created as we listen, rather than interpreted off a page. I love Corti's way of surprising the listener by varying his approach on repeated material. He has a lot of ideas as far as approaching the material, and we hear several of them in the same section. Given Corti's way of isolating the odd harmonic changes, I was led to hear a bit of proto-CPE Bach in Scarlatti's writing. I've heard a lot of recordings of Scarlatti's works over the years, and this is up there with the most compelling. In fact, I'd say this one is unique in its freshness of approach. It's a must-hear for Scarlatti fans, and I must have this on a CD.
As Corti explains in the recording notes, Scarlatti is a composer that continually defies expectations and goes against conventions. When your musical sensibilities have you thinking you know what's coming next, he's already moved on to something more interesting than you had imagined. I find this music demands more concentration to appreciate than most of the music from this period. I can sometimes play Baroque harpsichord music as a background to getting some work done, but Scarlatti pulls my attention to focus on what just happened. Corti's performance is dynamic and pulls out the contrasting moods. His technique, especially with bursts of notes, is really admirable, and this instrument has a uniquely pleasing, clear tone and is recorded at just the right distance for a balance of impact and clarity. Since you'll be focusing on the paired sonatas on this recording, I'd recommend splitting this up over a couple of sessions to maintain enough concentration to appreciate everything in this recording.
Yeah, it's a very long recording, and I found myself having to split it up too because there's so many intellectual surprises in it that it sort of wipes you out. I'd also suggest that, given the nutty, quick-changing times that we live in, this might be an ideal recording to accompany them, to just kind of align you with what's happening in the outside world. So give this a try. All right, next we have a very famous work by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, his Requiem, completed by Franz Xaver Süssmayr. Mozart was commissioned to write this, I think 3 years before he died or so, and he never completed it, and Süssmayr wound up completing it. The performers here are Ying Fang, soprano, Beth Taylor, alto, Laurence Kilsby, tenor, Alex Rosen, bass, Chadi Lazreq, treble, that's a boy's high voice, and this is by Pygmalion and directed by Raphaël Pichon on the Harmonia Mundi label, released on October 4th. Now, we heard a spectacular recording of the Monteverdi Vespers by this same ensemble last year, and I called it one of my recordings of the year. I thought it was just fantastic, and I still listen to it pretty regularly. Pichon and Pygmalion also put out a top-notch album of Bach's St. Matthew Passion, one of the giant works in the history of Western music.
Yeah.
And now we get the Mozart Requiem, so he's going for the big works, and he's really reinventing all of them. This work, too. Pichon presents this performance as a journey through time, starting with a child singing the In Paradisum plain chant on track 1, which is interrupted and completed at the end of the program. The interruption comes from the intrusion of a canon called Alas, Too Short is the Course of Our Life. Boy, hearing this at my age kind of makes me start nodding in agreement. The concept of memory is put across via the inclusion of little-known works from Mozart's youth. So we're not just getting the Requiem on this recording, it's sort of padded out with earlier works by Mozart, and it creates quite an effect. I'll try to explain it as we go on. So the first thing we hear is the plain chant Antje in Paradisum, with Chadi Lazreq singing the treble. It's just a chant. The boy treble has a sweet, high, angelic voice. It's a touching beginning to the album. The chant gets interrupted by the next track, but we will hear the rest of it as the last track on the album, and I'll give you a sample of Lazreq's treble later in the recording. Track 2, Ach, so kurz ist unser Lebenslauf, K228. This is, alas, too short is the course of our life. Sounds even shorter in German. Or maybe the words are longer because they're stretching it out. Maybe it's because I've used so much time in my life trying to say that sentence. Anyway, it's a canon. Ying Fang is the soprano, and Beth Taylor alto, Laurence Kilsby tenor, Alex Rosen bass. So the vocal quartet. It's odd how this comes in. It simply interrupts the plain chant. It has a polyphonic Renaissance feel to it, though the syllables move too quickly for the work to be from that era. We hear the four soloists for the Requiem here. It's a cappella, and this work appears to be unfinished. It ends on an unresolved note, something that was not done in the classical era, so I'm guessing it's not completed. Track 3, Miserere Me, originally a Kyrie, K90. This is a youthful Mozart work, and it's a lot like a Palestrina Renaissance-era work, with full voices from the chorus. The singing covers the tonal range so that we get an overall thick sound, solemn ending, and the first tonic resolution we hear. Okay, now that we're warmed up, we get to the actual Requiem on track 4. The first part, the Introitus, with Ying Fang as the soprano. The rhythm gets away from the heavy trudge it's generally given in this performance. It's more of a pulse here, more lightly taken. Even the sudden outbursts from the orchestra are taken lightly and closer to staccato. Let's hear an example of that and the entry of the chorus on the words Requiem aeternam dona eis Domine. Give them eternal rest, Lord. So this is interpretationally a departure from the past. The recording is clear and bright in the high end, and it's not very bassy. We hear soprano Ying Fang enter on the line Te decet hymnus Deus in Zion. A hymn will be sung to you in Zion. This is from the 2-minute mark. Let's hear the soloist Ying Fang. The big choral moments are interpreted less monumentally on this recording, in keeping with period practice. It's an interesting sound in this context, and it's taking me some getting used to. I am used to this being interpreted as a romantic work, with a big chorus and orchestra. The movement never gets enormously loud, and ends solemnly and beautifully. Track 5 is the second part of the Requiem, the Kyrie. The Kyrie has some excited movement to it, with the constant Handel-like trilling on vowel sounds coming across with an agitated feel. The setting is polyphonic, but more in the Baroque style than the Renaissance. With these forces, the connection to Handel is clear. There's a great unexpected false cadence before the final statement of Kyrie eleison. The melody sort of reminds me a bit of the chorus "And with his stripes" from Handel's Messiah. It's very similar. Track 6, Ne pulvis et cinis, K122. This is from Thamos, King of Egypt. Alex Rosen is the bass. So this is a departure from the Requiem. We are exiting that work for a moment. The opening of this is compelling, and we hear Alex Rosen solo here, so let's sample his voice. Is a big bass voice. The text warns the listener, rather dramatically, to not behave arrogantly, you who are dust and ashes. Rosen's bass is full and authoritative, and this is a powerful composition. There's a wonderful hushed section for chorus at the end, in which the sound reaches a startling pianissimo. The orchestration is ear-catching too, with a section for the women's section of the chorus seeming to float due to the absent bass. At the end, the next movement of the Requiem bursts in. That's track 7, Sequentia, and followed by part 1 of the Sequentia 1, Dies Irae. This seems energetic and anxiety-ridden, as was the Kyrie, so the previous movement was a welcome breaking up of the two sections. Orchestral detail is magnificent here. We then move to track 8, the Requiem, third part, Sequentia 1, Tuba Mirum. The Tuba Mirum section features the 4 soloists, and starts with, of course, a tuba. Alex Rosen has most of the solo. Then we hear Laurence Kilsby in the tenor role just before the first minute. So let's give a listen to him. Okay, so I'm fading out on Ying Fang's voice. The voice in the middle there was the alto, Beth Taylor. They sing in harmony at the end. I rather like the way they go from bass to tenor to alto to soprano. We go sort of up the chain of voices, and it has a full resolution at the end. Track 9, Sequentia 1, still, Rex Tremende. Again, this sounds much lighter here than on previous recordings, and I'm having to adjust. It's very interesting, though. Let's hear the opening. The tempo is quicker than usual, but that's been the case throughout the work. It's a good thing to be getting away from the romantic practice of the past with this work. This recording has me listening to the work with new ears. Now, one of the reasons I, and maybe some listeners, might think that this is less heavy is because we're mostly familiar with the version of this work that we heard in the movie Amadeus, which is kind of more on the romantic end, although that was by Neville Marriner. He still had sort of a heavy feel back in the day. This is a little different. It's quicker, and it's not, I'd hardly call it light, but it's lighter. So I've seen that movie so many times that I've only heard this recording once, so it's going to take some adjusting for me. Track 10, Solfeggio in F major, K393, number 2, orchestrated by Vincent Manach. I don't know how to say that. Anyway, Chadi Lazreq is the treble. So we hear the boy soprano here singing solfege, and I haven't sampled him yet, so let's hear the opening of this, which is not part of the Requiem composition. It's a separate piece, so we exit the Requiem for a moment to hear this. All right, now the thing about boy sopranos is they usually don't have that air support that professional singers have, so they'll go off pitch slightly. This boy soprano is pretty much on pitch. He's impressively steady, so this is a really good performance by him as well. He's got an impressive pitch, and he gets those angelic high notes too. Track 11, Sequentia 2, Recordare. This features the vocal quartet. Back to the Requiem. After the solfege interlude lightens our hearts. This section is light too, and the previous solfege prepares us well. And it was just getting going. The heavenly voices on the second line of text in each section is in fact just that. The soloists sing in harmony for the first section of text, then echo each other from the next section. I like the reversion to the lower range of the soloist voices in the Ingemisco section on the words tamquam reus and vultus meus, which they also almost speak rather than sing. Legato flowing style is back for the next section. The string playing here is light and vibrato-less, as it has been throughout the work. 12, Sequentia 2 still, Confutatis. The opening here retains its power and gains a bit of aggression given the tempo. This section is famously portrayed in the film Amadeus when Salieri is helping the dying Mozart get the Requiem on paper. Let's hear the opening of this. Yeah, those heavenly voices that came in the middle of all of that really achieved that heavenly tone. The section ends calmly. We move to track 13, still Sequentia 2, Lacrimosa and Amen, Appendix K626. Weeping string figures without vibrato, giving them a crystalline sound, introduce the gentle Lacrimosa of the chorus. And just as some volume's coming in, I fade out. How about that? There's a big outburst at 2 minutes and 22 seconds that eventually decrescendos to a feeling of resignation, only to crescendo again with booming period-style timpani drum rolls on the final statement of Requiem. There's a lovely melisma-filled Amen at the end that looks back to past settings of this word. It doesn't end on a cadence, but is interrupted by a silence. Track 14, Requiem, Offertorium 1, Domine Jesu Christe. This features the vocal quartet. The chorus begins the section with rushing figures. This is excitable in much the same way as earlier sections. The soloists come in polyphonically for a few lines, after which the chorus takes over again. There's an Amen cadence at the end without the word Amen. 15, Quis te comprehendat, Kerschel Anhang 110. So this is not part of the Requiem composition. It's an early work by Mozart. It's gentle and is sung by the chorus. The orchestral music sounds like it was taken from or used in the third movement of the Grand Partita. I recognize the oboe line. It's suitable here because this section of the instrumental Grand Partita was also used in the film Amadeus, when Salieri first looks at Mozart's music and is shocked by his genius. It was like he was taking dictation from God, Salieri says, when you're hearing this music, without the vocals. I've never heard this with text, though, and it comes across as light and touching. The text starts with, "Who can comprehend thy greatness, O Most High?" Track 16, back to the Requiem. Offertorium 2, Hostias. The choral singing features contrasts in forte and piano, constantly moving back and forth between the two dynamics with each line. Again, the vibratoless strings lighten the texture, with the chorus providing the drama. At around 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the tempo suddenly picks up, as does the dramatic tension on the repeated words Memoriam facimus, we remember. The brass at the end underlined the cadence. Track 17, Requiem, 5th part, Sanctus. A majestic Sanctus is heard in the chorus. I like the way the majesty comes across without being overstated. The Hosanna in Excelsis is given a lighter polyphonic treatment. Track 18, Benedictus from the Requiem. This features the vocal quartet. We hear the 4 soloists in this movement, but let's hear alto Beth Taylor open this section of the work. And that soprano, of course, at the end is Ying Fang. I enjoyed Alex Rosen's lead beginning at 1 minute and 40 seconds. He gets a solo for a while. Once again, the Hosanna soars. It's given a 6/8 feel and is quick. Track 19, we depart from the Requiem again with a work called O Gottes Lamm, the Lamb of God, K343, orchestrated by Vincent Manach. Let's sample Beth Taylor's solo voice again in this work. There's fantastic singing all over this album. The voices all just come up really well. The text begins as, O Lamb of God, thou didst give thy life a ransom, which sung in German here. It comes across solemnly, and the dark shading of Taylor's voice give it real weight. The chorus comes in a cappella at the 2 minute and 30 second mark, presenting a clean, solemn tone. The choral section sounds like a chorale in its phrasing. Track 20, back to the Requiem. The 7th section, Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God. The Agnus Dei has some anguished power to it, with spiraling string lines and forbidding choral lines. The Dona Eis Requiem part becomes gentle. This ends on a beautiful pianissimo crescendoing to mezzo forte. Let's just hear the opening. Track 21, this is the conclusion of the Requiem, Communio, featuring Ying Fang, soprano soloist. Let's hear her. Okay, so at the opening there, she's singing "Let Eternal Light Shine Upon Them, O Lord." And then we heard the chorus coming in for a big-boned assist. And the chorus becomes more imposing and majestic as the text goes on. Cum sanctis tuis in aeternum is given polyphonic treatment, common at the time, and giving the work a satisfying ending. This winds up sounding a lot like Handel with the current forces. In fact, the theme sounds a bit like "And with His Stripes Again" from Messiah, like we heard earlier. I'd never noticed that before, and I wonder if it's Sussmayer's doing. There's a great interrupted cadence at the end, leading to the majestic work, ending the final cadence. Now, Mozart was looking back as part of his idea for the structure of this work, so the references to Handel are probably intentional. Track 22, the final track on the album, is a repeat of the track 1, except that we hear it in full this time. The plain chant Antien in Paradisum, sung by Chadi Lazreq treble. Lazreq's angelic treble leaves an angelic sound in our ears. The text is repeated with women's voices singing unison harmony in the background and slight canon with the treble voice, sounding like a heavenly echo. And that's the end of the album. While last year's Monteverdi Vespers by this ensemble was a new benchmark for the work, this recording of the Mozart Requiem stands alone for different reasons. It's a unique approach and a fresh-sounding one, too. I'm amazed at what Pichon has achieved with Pygmalion over the past few years. This, Monteverdi, and Bach's St. Matthew Passion were all riveting recordings. I have to say I like this work with this classically sized orchestra and the lighter sound of the vibrato-less strings and smaller chorus. In fact, I took to the Mozart Requiem for the first time here. In the past, I'd only picked up on individual sections, but this sounded like a complete and well-orchestrated work of even quality throughout. It may be because of the smaller forces. The bigger romantic interpretations tend to lose strength as they go on, but on this performance it doesn't. It's a recording I would return to, mostly for the freshness of the interpretation and the sound produced by the ensemble, beautifully caught on the recording.
This is really a monumental work.
Yeah.
A long listening session. Unlike the previous recording, you really have to do this all in one sitting.
Yeah, I thought it went pretty fast, though, to be honest.
It does.
Yeah.
So I was listening to it rather holistically, and I kind of agree with what you pointed out. It's a svelte rendition with the instrumentation and the balance with the vocals, so it doesn't have any kind of bloated effect even in the really dynamic sections. I kind of enjoyed that. It seems to move along with the tempos compared to previous, earlier versions that I've heard. And it flows really well. I really enjoyed the vocal blend on the recording and the balance with the instruments. As you said, this ensemble we've come to like. And yeah, it gave me a new appreciation for this work by Mozart, which I had listened to kind of sectionally before.
Yeah,
I think.
Same as me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just felt like I was pulled through it. And it wasn't like a long burden to listen to the whole performance. Right. I was carried straight through it, and I think that's one indicator of a really good performance as well.
Yeah, and I also have to repeat that the solo vocalists on this album are all fantastic, so yes. They pull you through as well. Just all of these voices just shine and are just really appealing to listen to. They have a wonderful warmth to them. Okay, Contemporary Composer of the Week, Peteris Vasks.
Yeah.
A favorite of ours. This is a very short recording of Violin Concerto No. 2 in Evening Light. This was composed in 2020, and it features, I should have looked up the pronunciation of this guy's name, Antje Weithaas, violin and leader, and the Camerata Bern. So he's playing the solo violin on this as well as conducting the orchestra. This is on the Avi music label and features only this work, so it's 35 minutes long. We only get this concerto. It's a normal length concerto, but the album itself is very short as it only has this one work on it. It was released on September 27th, and it's a digital-only release so far. When I say digital only, I realize CDs are digital, but what I mean is you have to get it from online. It's streaming. Right. Okay, Vasks' first violin concerto was written almost 25 years before this one, and it's really famous. It's probably his most famous work. This recording was made in the studio in connection with a series of concerts given in Bern, Switzerland in February 2024. Evening Light is a farewell metaphor. As is often the case with Vasks, the attempt to describe the high and low episodes of human existence is approached by interrupting moments of silence with outbursts of chaos. These energies gather to allow a glimmer of hope to appear again in the concerto's third and final movement. Evening light is a metaphor here for the twilight years in our lives. According to booklet essay writer Amy Brudelin, birdsong also inspired Vasks to write this concerto, as did an aspect of religious faith. Vasks grew up as a pastor's son. On the other hand, the chaos unleashed by destructive fury also reflects the composer's experiences in real life. His upbringing in a small Latvian town was characterized by fear, censorship, and a sense of hopelessness. Vasks suffered from having to do military service in the Red Army, as well as from general restrictions associated with life under Soviet rule. His religious beliefs and refusal to compose according to Soviet ideologies brought the authorities' disapproval upon him. However, such experiences also strengthened Vasks in his Latvian identity, which is why many of his works bear a title in his mother tongue. So, this is a 5-track work. It's actually in 3 movements, but there are cadenzas separating them. The first movement is marked Andante con passione. This and the third movement exude a calm, melancholy atmosphere of farewell to life, with a hopeful glimpse of evening light on the horizon. The work starts with a romantic, impassioned outburst from the springs, and this dissipates into a quiet texture, and the violin enters silently, almost whispering. Let's just hear the opening first. Now, I want to fade out there because the violin solo is coming in soon, and it's a really interesting entry. It's very different from what we expect from a concerto because the violin enters silently, almost whispering. Listen carefully. Now, Vasks' melodic lines tend to be very long and winding and stretched out, and you just want to keep hearing it, but I'm going to have to fade out there and leave it to you, listener, to seek out the link for the download of this piece. The solo line builds as it goes, slowly reaching a peak at around the 4-minute mark. We weren't going to sample all the way up to there, playing high up in its range. From there, it plays familiar material from the beginning of its melodic climb, and there's another peak at about 5 minutes and 45 seconds, from which the line quietens and drops into its mid-range. It's very melodic and lyrical, this whole section, this whole movement, really. At the end of the movement, the string orchestra takes over and brings the impassioned music down to a quieter dynamic. Track 2, Cadenza 1. The violin resolves the previous movement, which also serves as the beginning chord of the cadenza. There's a lot of double stopping here, but all of the playing is mellifluous and flowing. Let's hear the opening of this movement. When Vasks thinks cadenza, he tends to think double stop on the violin. It gets a bit lively, too, picking up a bouncing rhythm momentarily at 1 minute and 10 seconds. The cadenza goes on for an impressive length of over 3 minutes. In the 3rd minute, there's some pretty melodicizing up in the high end, followed by an intense double-stopped climb that brings us to a second movement after a pause. Track 3 is the second movement of the concerto, Andante Cantabile. The movement evokes a human being looking back on an entire life, including dramatic moments. This reflection leads to ecstasy after the cadenza. The movement starts quietly in the strings with a rather resigned air to the harmony. It kind of recalls the opening of Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings in character. The violin comes in quietly at about the 50-second mark, brushing out the sound gently with the bow. The violin again heads via a slow crescendoing climbing melody to a climax up high at about the 3 minute and 20-second mark, followed by a gentle falling double-stopped line. I'm going to start just before that peak, and I'll let you hear the climax of this violin line. Vasks gets an enormous amount of emotion into his orchestra writing and solo writing, and Weithaas really draws that out here, too. This is a really great performance of a very good work, actually, maybe a great work, too. The violin shows quiet anguish in the tone in the 4th minute, melodically heading up to the high end again. This sort of diffuses into harmony from the strings, then the violin starts a winding climb way up in the high end, finishing at 5 minutes and 45 seconds or so. We get contrasting low strings in the orchestra afterwards at about the 6 minute mark. At 6 minutes and 44 seconds, the bow slashes across the strings for a harder, more frustrated sound from the violin as the orchestra rhythmically accompany. The violin again heads into the high end for an impassioned end to the movement, which the strings finish, leaving the last chord unresolved. We get to track 4, Cadenza 2. The violin begins its second cadenza after a brief pause. This one is heavy and double stops as well. By the 1st minute, the violin is playing a softer, more lamenting line, and I'll sample a bit of that from around the 1 minute and 30-second mark. This is an even longer cadenza than the first, at over 6 minutes. The orchestra actually comes in the 4th minute with some slashing figures from the strings, which the solo violin virtuosically tries to climb out of. Will he get there? Well, you'll have to listen to a lot more of this after the point that I faded out at. By the end, the violin is playing with a lot of emotion. The strings are fortissimo by the end, climbing to a peak that's emphatically nailed down by loud, repeated notes. The fifth track is the third and final movement, Andante con amore, with love. The third and final movement begins without a pause, but is suddenly quiet, and at the beginning, we hear the downhearted violin healing after the conflict it just experienced in the cadenza. Vasks really excels at communicating this emotion, so let's hear this. You hear the strings coming in and providing a bit of the healing to the downhearted violin. When I say that Vasks excels at the emotion, I mean that downhearted, dispirited feeling that suddenly gets picked up. It's something unique to him. Well, it's not unique to him. It's unique to his style of writing. There's a pause after an unresolved harmony at the 4-minute and 30-second mark. The violin continues afterwards at a quiet dynamic, always playing with deep feeling and lyricism. Vasks is a really good melodist. There's a suddenly anxious outburst at 6 minutes and 30 seconds. At 7 minutes, the violin starts a beautiful, lightly pleading line that ends on a high sustained note at 7 minutes and 40 seconds. It wavers around up there as the low strings provide a quiet harmonic bed. The ending is serene, with a pianissimo glissando upward from the orchestra, shimmering in its harmony as the violin ends in the blissful highest end of the instrument. So Vasks' second violin concerto is a beautiful addition to his oeuvre. It probably won't gain the popularity of the first violin concerto, but it's probably more deeply emotional. The work is at times dramatic, impassioned, and soothing, even healing. Vasks has a wonderful way of drawing personal emotion out of large symphonic works, and he gives the violin some beautiful moments, particularly in the last movement. Antje Weithaas is highly emotive as the soloist, traversing the material and the emotions written into them with a naturalness that makes the listener feel the emotion right along with him. The entire work unfolds with a naturalness that makes this recording an automatic benchmark for future performances. It's a great way to discover the music of Pēteris Vasks if you're not familiar with it already, a contemporary composer with a lot of heart and empathy. I highly recommend this to listeners.
This is really easy to enjoy and understand for contemporary composition. Right away from the beginning, you get these sweeping and kind of cinematic sounding strings. Then it gets light and that wonderful entrance of the violin that works delicately over the strings. The harmonies are rich, and I enjoyed all of the lines. Weithaas's violin tone is warm and lyrical throughout, and I really like the blend between him and the orchestra itself. I'm not often a big fan of just string orchestral works because I always feel like I'm missing the winds. There are exceptions like Vaughan Williams, and I also think this one is a big exception to me too because I was really drawn into the sound world. And I enjoyed Vasks' harmonies and the development of ideas. The overall arc is interesting. There is this tension that keeps building, and the energy is created by that, and it comes up to a peak, but then finally releases to a soft ending. And I really enjoyed the tone of the violin on the recording. It's warm and kind of magical. So very easy work to understand, and the harmonies sound really intriguing.
Yeah, and so far it's the only recording of this work available, so hopefully it'll come out on a CD with something else on it to just kind of pad it out a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be nice, yeah.
Only a 35-minute long album so far.
On to the jazz side of the program. Now we've got all fresh faces for us, for the leaders anyway. I think there may be one or two names that have popped up on recordings before. And we've got a lot of variety here. We're going to start out in Italy with guitarist Luca Gelli's Shorter Notes. This is on Dodicilune, and it came out October 1st, and it caught my eye for two reasons. It's an organ trio, basically, with a few horns, and it's the music of Wayne Shorter. We're going to get all Wayne Shorter compositions here. Luca Gelli is a guitarist who has played jazz, pop, funk, and blues. He's been a leader as well as a sideman. Started playing as a self-taught musician, and then he went on to specialize at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, and then at the Cherubini Conservatory in Florence. In jazz, he's played with a lot of big names, Massimo Manzi, Nico Gori, who's on this recording, and a lot of others. He's recorded about 10 albums and participated in concerts throughout Italy and abroad. From 2010 to 2016, he led his original project, The Gelli Factory, which recorded 3 albums. And 2008 to 2018, he played on tour with the funk band Dirota Sukuba, with whom he recorded the album Studio Session Volume 1 in 2016. He also teaches, and he has various educational publications to his credit. About this recording, the notes say, and these are translated from Italian, the idea of a project on Wayne Shorter's music was born shortly before his death, which took place in early 2023. Shortly thereafter, also moved by the great emotion for such a great loss, Shorter Notes took a concrete form, a tribute to his compositions dating back to the mid-1960s, among the great classics of his repertoire, such as Speak No Evil or Yes or No, and also other less performed pieces such as House of Jade or Fee Fi Fo Fum. The original arrangements enhance the Blue Note style sound of my trio along with the numerous guests, in some cases strongly respecting the original versions, in others largely reworking the starting material. Sounds intriguing, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at the personnel on this recording. Luca Gelli on guitar, Manrico Seghi on Hammond organ, Giovanni Paolo Liguori on the drums, Dario Cecchini on Barry sax on one track, Cosimo Boni on trumpet on one track, Pier do Samiero on tenor sax on one track, and Nico Gori on clarinet. This was produced by Luca Gelli and Maurizio Bisocchetti from Dodicilune, recorded 24th and 25th of August 2023 by Antonio Castiello at Puccini Road, Fucecchio, Italy. Mixed and mastered December 2023 at Jambona Lab in Livorno, Italy. Sound engineer Antonio Castiello, assistant Aldo De Sanctis. The recording's going to start out with Wayne Shorter's Yes or No from his 1965 recording Juju. If you know the original, Shorter comes right in on the melody, which has an interesting AABA structure with 14 measure A sections and a 16 measure B section. Here they give it a vamping intro working up to the melody start from Gelli with meaty double stops. Seghi's choppy organ chords give it some added intensity, and from the 9th measure of the A section it really gets swinging with walking organ bass. Let's hear this recording get started. Off into the B section from there. Let's come back in to hear some of Gelli's improvised solo on this tune. nice clean tone, and the rhythmic change-ups underneath keep things exciting. He works into some choppy chord ideas before Seggi gets an energetic organ solo. Liguori works up some drum fills on vamping before another time through the melody, and the ending is stretched out nicely in their arrangement. A fun start to the recording. Track 2 is Infant Eyes. This is from Shorter's 1966 Speak No Evil album. The original has a unique Herbie Hancock solo piano intro, transformed here by Gelli with a solo start on guitar into the melody, backing himself with chords. Let's hear it get going. When organ and drums come in just before 2 minutes, the organ bass and Seggi's tone is great on his lines, so let's hear a little bit of that as well. Great tones there, and Gelli has a subtle improvised solo over dreamy organ chords before connecting back to the melody. It's a very nicely reimagined ballad. Track 3, Adam's Apple, the title track from Shorter's 1967 recording. The original was somewhat funky from Reginald Workman's opening bass, but Gelli funks it up even more with some nice rhythm guitar work. Seggi's organ joins in with a cool tone, and then we get Dario Cecchini on Barry sax for the bluesy 24-measure melody. Check out what they've done with some silent gaps along the way. Again, Gelli solos first with lots of bluesy ideas and fluid lines, but of course we've got to check out some of Cecchini's Barry solo that picks up off from Gelli's last lick. Barry sax solo, a little vamp section takes it back into a final time through the melody. Track 4, Speak No Evil, the title track from the 1966 recording. They give it an 8-measure intro. The original had Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, working the lines with Shorter, and Herbie Hancock filling in lots of tasty ideas. Here, guitar and organ work the lines together with improvised fills from Gelli. Nice organ bass lines. This is another Shorter tune with a main melody section of 14 measures. The bridge section has neat interval jumping short phrases. Let's take a listen. Section one more time there. Let's hear Gelli's solo on this one. Minor bluesy touches. Seghi's organ solo has some interesting harmonic explorations, and when they take a final run through the melody, Ligori gets to fill in on the drums over the long legato lines. It ends up on the bridge section. Track 5, also from Speak No Evil, Fi Fi Fo Fum. The original has a rhythm section intro with some syncopated piano chords. Here we get the horns right away with Cosimo Boni on trumpet and Piero Dosemiero on tenor sax joining in. It's a nice horn arrangement along with the guitar and Gelli getting to take over for a section. Then Dosemiero is off on a sax solo. Let's have a listen. Let's come back in and hear some of Boni's trumpet solo on this one. Very nice. Both horn solos have a light, playful sense that makes a good mood. Once more, through the melody wraps up the tune. Track 6, Tom Thumb. This is from 1967's Schizophrenia. They keep the same kind of funky Latin atmosphere as the original, stretching the intro. The original had James Spaulding on alto sax with some starting figures. Here, Gelli adds some ideas before getting into the 18-measure repeating melody. Check out this nice groove. And let's hear Siggy's organ solo on this one. Gelli takes another round of the melody before getting into his own improvisations that have some cool accented double stops. Track 7, Night Dreamer, the title track from Shorter's 1964 Blue Note debut. The original had rubato piano cascades from McCoy Tyner before getting into the waltz meter for this tune. Here, Gelli gets us waltzing right away with some solo guitar and a clear bass line getting the intro going. Guitar and organ work together on the melody with nice drum fills from Liguori. They go around the 16-measure melody twice, Gelli taking it up an octave the second time. organ solos follow. Let's check out the ending of the tune, where Liguori plays some tasty drum fills, building up energy to a great final organ shimmer. House of Jade. This is also from 1965's Juju. The original has a rippling, exotic McCoy-Tyner rubato opening before the 24-measure ballad melody, something completely different and cool here, with great toned organ chords and some bluesy guitar licks and trills. Check this out. Gelli's guitar solo on this one has a nice change up to a double-time feel with walking organ bass lines. They downshift it again and bring it softer for the start of Seghi's organ solo that has some new deep tones. He's really good at making appealing drawbar settings, so let's hear some of these nice sounds. Tone. They work it to one last A section of the melody with final phrase repeats and an atmospheric slowed ending. And the recording is going to finish up with Armageddon from 1964's Night Dreamer. This is quite different from the original that started out with an intro of horn lines with lots of 16th notes. Lee Morgan was on trumpet on that original recording. Here they've made a syncopated chord trio opening, and Nico Godi joins in softly on the main melody on clarinet. We've heard him before on Fabrizio Bosso's We Wonder recording. Let's hear this one get started. let's check out some of Corti's clarinet solo that starts out down low and gets really animated. Take it around the melody again, and then Gelli gets a bluesy guitar solo to a fade-out over jamming double stops. So, organ trio plus Wayne Shorter compositions turns out to be a satisfying recipe. Gelli and company make a good balance of reverence and reinvention. If you don't know the originals, or even if you do, this is a good chance to go back and check out some of Shorter's classic 1960s recordings. Gelli's guitar is clean-toned, and his solos are fluid with bluesy sentiments and tasty double stops and chord ideas. Seggy's organ playing stands out with a palette of different tones that match the mood, nice bass lines and grooves, and exciting solos. Corti's drumming is tight and tasty with fills that catch your ear, and the horn guests add nice variety in the program with a standout solo from Corti's clarinet to end the show.
Yeah, we have Wayne Shorter. We have one of our favorite combinations, guitar and organ.
Yeah. With
some guest soloists showing up along the way. There's genuine enthusiasm to this playing as well as a good feel. I really took to Gelli's solid guitar tone immediately. He plays with a lot of presence. And Seggy's organ he can be soulful and he's atmospheric and he gets a lot of great swells on it too.
Yeah.
And I also like his chord spacings. The guest soloists on Fee Fi Fo Fum added a lot of interest via their brass timbre to the track, as did Corti's clarinet on Armageddon. It's a light take on Shorter's music and one to really enjoy. This really kind of grooved along, and I really liked it.
Yeah, one of the things making this podcast, we have to listen to so much new music. Thousands of albums, right? We've listened to. And I feel like sometimes I neglect my classic collection of things. So I have to make a conscious choice. Like today, no new music. I'm just going to go back and listen to Freddie Hubbard, or I'm going to listen to
that too.
Something.
Yeah.
And so this was a good chance to refresh my memory and check out these Shorter albums in their original form of the tunes once more. So that was a lot of fun.
Always a good thing to do, yeah. We're going to be doing that again next week, by the way.
Great. All right, our second recording, a new artist to me, and I'm glad I discovered his playing, trumpeter Lex French, In the World's First Summer on Justintime Records, came out October 4th. New Zealand-born trumpet player Lex French is now on the Canadian jazz scene. He's worked with names like Benny Maupin and Aaron Parks, Diana Krall, Patty Austin, Kurt Elling, Charles McPherson, and a lot more. He's also a composer and arranger, and he has been commissioned to write works for jazz orchestra, jazz quartet, and string quartet. He currently works at McGill University's Schulich School of Music in Montreal, teaching large and small ensembles, jazz trumpet, jazz improvisation, composition, and graduate jazz pedagogy. From the notes for this recording, this project takes inspiration from Miles Davis's seminal second quintet in its approach, a group that has influenced so many musicians over the last 50 years. And this is quoted from French. When I was about 16 years old, in 1998 or 99, I bought a copy of Miles Davis's 1967 album, Miles Smiles, and was immediately captivated. Ever since that first listen, I've wanted to lead a group that followed in the footsteps of Miles's seminal second quintet. His quintet was a band that prioritized communication and improvisation, embraced lush and open harmonic soundscapes, and above all placed the spirit of spontaneity at the center of everything. That sounds like an interesting premise. On this recording, Lex French on trumpet, Francois Bourassa on piano, Morgan Moore on bass, and Jim Doxas on drums. Executive producer Jim West, produced by Lex French. It was recorded by George Doxas at Boutique des Sons, Montreal, Quebec, June 12th and 13th, 2023. Mastered by Dave Horrocks at Infinite Wave Mastering, Calgary, Alberta in April of 2024. The recording is going to get going with a Lex French original, Color Grid. No messing around here. French has a little pickup figure into the 16-measure melody section over cool syncopated modal harmonies with neat bass figures and unexpected pauses. He uses the pickup figure to launch into improvisations over Moore's chugging bass. Let's hear this recording get going. He keeps pushing the intensity with agile phrases into the higher register. Bourassa follows with a piano solo with furious drumming underneath from Doxas and some trumpet stabs too. Let's check out a little bit of that. Once more through the melody section ends it. We're off to an exciting start for this recording. Track 2 is our only standard on the album Bye Bye Blackbird by Ray Henderson and Mort Dixon, of course recorded by Miles Davis in 1957. The original recording was in 1926 by Sam Lannon's Dance Orchestra. A rubato solo piano introduction by Bourassa that works into some rippling waves of lines. Let's hear some of those into the bass and drums coming in, and then French coming in on the famous melody. His phrasing is snappy and puckish with an essence of Miles in there, and keeps that feel into his improvisations with a nice space between ideas. Let's check out some of his long solo when he gets into some longer connected phrases and spits out some fun high notes as well. Barossa has a piano solo, and then he and French trade eights with Doxas before heading back into the melody with some extended final soft improvisations from French. Track 3 is an original by French, Falling Up, a waltzing ballad here. There's an 8-measure intro before French is in on the melody. It's kind of an AABA shape with a couple extra measures on the end to 34 measures. Nice harmonies, and Barossa takes the B section on piano. Let's take a listen. Is off on a bass solo from there, with interesting ringing high register rhythmic figures. French follows with a solo that has a lot of searching phrases and navigation into tricky harmonic spots. He ends with some staccato notes. Let's check out some of Barossa's piano solo on this one that has percussive chords and tremolos building up excitement. Comes down soft for French to return with the melody. It's a ballad with a lot of intensity. Track 4, Lullaby, Nana. Well, this is a lullaby from Spanish composer Manuel de Falla's 1914 collection, 7 Spanish folk songs. The repeating descending piano line becomes hypnotic, and Moore's modal bass improvisations bring out the Spanish flavor. Have a taste of this. French comes in with a melody section and then takes a breather before coming back with improvisations. Things get feverish and intense with some harmonic tension and high lines from French. Let's hear some of that. After a final stately high trumpet theme, it gets a quiet ending. It's a very atmospheric piece. Track 5, Huancavelica. This is a French original. I guess that's a city in Peru. Doxas gets to start this one out on drums to a long diminishing roll. He then gets a Latin beat going, joined by an ostinato bass idea from Moore. I'll pick it up from the beat into the melody when French comes in. There's a switch to a couple measures of 3/4 time that makes things interesting as it goes along. French is off soloing first. This is an exciting one, so let's come back in to hear a little bit more of it. Has an exciting piano solo as well next. Then it comes down softly for Doxas to work up the drums a bit, but it comes down soft again into a return of the ostinato to bring back the melody once more. Track 6, In the World's First Summer, an original by French. It's also the title track here. Barossa gets it going with some mysterious solo piano. Let's listen from where French comes in with the rubato melody, and the two move in sync with lovely backing from Barossa. Some drums finally join in there, still in rubato synchronization. Moore gets a pulse going with some bass figures, and then Bourassa has a solo. Let's hear some of his playing on this tune. French comes in next there with his solo that has intense ideas but a relaxed sense of phrasing. The pulse suddenly falls away and things reset for a final rubato melody section to end this one. Track 7, Going Home. Antonin Dvorak wrote his Symphony No. 9 from the New World soon after arriving in America in 1893, and one of Dvorak's students, William Arms Fisher, put words to the longing melody from the second movement, and he called the new song Going Home. It was published in 1922. Everyone knows this melody. Let's hear the gentle treatment that French has arranged for it here. And let's check out Moore's melodic bass solo that emerges from the final melody phrase. A great tone and phrasing there. Bourassa follows with a solo with a fine touch in the upper register, and French has gentle improvisations that go down low and show off a warm tone, working around ideas from the melody before returning with the final melody section.
Yeah, just as an aside, that melody is very famous in Japan. In fact, when I was out in Obama City in Fukui Prefecture, the town hall plays it on their bells when the clock strikes 12 in the middle of the day. Yeah, it's kind of a nice thing to hear.
Yeah. And the recording ends up with Voilà bon vent, if I'm pronouncing that right, the good wind. This seems to be a French folk song that was adopted and adapted by Canadians in the 18th century, but this is not the version you sang by the campfire in Quebec. A fast tempo and relentless repeated note bass from Moore get French ready for an intense improvised start. If you know the tune, you'll probably recognize the melody when he gets to it. Let's check it out. Things get delirious with an out-there solo from Barassa that turns rhythmic and locks in with doxas. Let's check out a little bit of that. French is back with more of the melody and then some edgy chromatic improvised lines and intense high register forays. There's a final melody line and fun last trumpet improvisations to finish it up. So Lex French has taken all of his post-bop trumpet vitamins. You can hear the influence of Miles Davis, Freddie Hubbard, Woody Shaw, and a lot more in his improvised ideas. He's got his own thing, though, and I like that he takes a lot of chances getting himself into challenging harmonic spots to work out of. His sound is multifaceted with a warm tone for ballads and a strong high register. His compositions show off that versatility from lush ballad writing to modal post-bop themes. The rest of the program is surprising too, with one standard, reimagined classical themes from Manuel de Falla and Dvorak, and even a French folk song. A great rhythm section here too, with sensitive ballad backing and adventurous solos from Barassa on piano. Great tone and drive from Moore on the bass, and really intense drumming from Doxas. A unique and satisfying recording with a lot of exciting moments.
Yeah, and it's got great sound as well.
Yeah.
The bass has like a lively thumping sound. The drums just jump out of the speakers too. And it's an album with a lot of classical references. So if you're a classical music listener, this is a good jazz record to jump into. Lex French is a trumpeter with big, outreaching sound and some bright ideas as well that all fit together into satisfying individual solos. He was exciting to listen to, and the bass, of course, caught my ear for its full sound on the recording. The piano added a lot of atmosphere, But for me, it's really French's record. He's the center of attention. Most of the record is pretty lively, but there's some sensitively played ballads such as Going Home, yes, the Dvorak theme, and the band stretch out on Falling Up in the World's First Summer and V'là le bon vent. That last track was fascinating for its evocation of a building wind from the piano and drums. And pianist Francois Bourassa seemed to draw from Debussy's piano works. There's a piano prelude called Ce que vaut le vent d'Ouest, and it kind of has similar effects in it. It's one of the piano preludes from Book 1 in Debussy's set of preludes. It's a record with a lot of variety and some great tone and soloing, and especially from Lex French himself.
Yeah, I'll be keeping my ear open for some more recordings from him in the future for sure.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go back over to Europe for French drummer Olivier Robin. Take It Like It Is on Fresh Sound New Talent. Came out October 4th as well. Robin started playing drums at the age of 15. His teacher, a fan of Buddy Rich, encouraged him to listen to Art Blakey, Elvin Jones, Max Roach, and Tony Williams. He played in local clubs and then moved to Paris in the mid-1980s, where he studied classical percussion at the conservatory. And at the same time, he toured Germany with a Berlin free jazz group. In 2004, he created a quintet with Sébastien Jarousse, which released 2 records, Tribulation and Dreamtime. And in 2016, he released the album Jungle Box as leader and composer. So on this recording, Olivier Robin, drums and compositions. Josiah Woodson on the trumpet, an American trumpeter. Alex Terrier, alto and soprano sax. He's French, but graduated from Berklee College of Music and is kind of based in New York. Albert Bover on piano. He's from Barcelona, Spain. And Fabricio Nicolas, a French Colombian bassist from Venezuela. Not sure how that works out, but we've got quite an international cast here. Recorded at Studio Midi Live, Vietnus, France, on June 27th and 28th, 2023. Sound engineer Leo Aubry. Mixed and mastered by Julien Basseres at Studio de Meudon in September of 2023. The recording gets going with the title track, Take It Like It Is. This has a long 52-measure horn melody arrangement. It unfolds in 8-measure sections that repeat with some variation, and each 16-measure section has a different rhythmic feel. The final section has 4 extra measures that lead into an energetic piano solo from Bover. Let's hear this one get started. As you would expect on a drum-led recording, the drums are super clear and you can hear all of the cymbal textures throughout the recording. Woodson follows Bover's solo, so let's check out his trumpet playing on this tune. Nice big tone and flexibility. They keep the rhythmic change-ups for the solos, which keeps things exciting. Terrier follows from there on alto sax, and they take it through the melody once more to finish it out. Track 2 is Fragment, a medium waltz tempo with a bass ostinato. Terrier is on soprano sax here, and the harmonized and weaving horn melody lines are appealing. It's a long melody. The trumpet has a pickup line from the 8th measure into a 16-measure section. There's a short interlude, and then we hear that section again, and then a new, longer section. We'll just get a taste of all of that in a 1-minute sample. Bover's up first for a piano solo, so let's check out his playing on this tune. Piano touch. Terrier follows with a soprano sax solo with a liquid tone and some neat pitch bends. After his solo, the ostinato returns with some delicate piano fills from Bover to bring back a final round of the melody with the bass walking out of the ostinato at the end. Track 3, back to the 60s. This has a funky bass ostinato and a modal kind of maiden voyage atmosphere to it, but the 7/4 meter makes it unique. The melody is long and evolving with legato horn lines that contrast with the busy bass below. Woodson gets a solo with a lot of cool double-time lines and snappy rhythmic figures, so let's check out another one from him on this tune. still has quite a ways to go there. Bover is next with a more floating phrasing style in his lines full of ideas. The flowing horn melody is back once again with some sax and trumpet simultaneous improvisations on a vamping ending that gets softer and softer to a sudden stop. Track 4, Express Lane, a really swinging number here. The 32-measure melody sounds tricky, but has a returning phrase that sticks with you. Lots of nice fills from Rosen and locking in from the rhythm section. Let's hear it into the start of Terrier's smoking alto sax solo. And next it's time to hear from our leader with a drum solo from Rosen. Woodson's next with speedy connected lines of ideas in his solo, and Bover has a piano solo too with interesting ideas from both hands before a final run through the melody. Track 5 is White Shark. This starts out with a bass solo from Nicholas. I'll give you a sample about 30 seconds into the tune before the playful horn lines come in. There's a 2-beat measure in there to throw you off balance for a minute, and tasty piano fills from Bover. Is off on an alto sax solo first. A little horn melody phrase makes a transition to a trumpet solo from Woodson with some bluesy licks, and again that transition for Bover's piano solo. They get back to the first section of the melody, and the horns get some simultaneous improvisations and then join up on the final lines that lead to an anticipation-building drum fill before the last note. Let's check out the ending of the tune. Track 6 is Snowed. Bover makes a pretty rubato solo piano opening for this gentle tune. The flowing horn line melody is 48 measures with new developments throughout, but it has a returning phrase. Let's hear the beginning. After the melody, Nicholas gets a bass solo first. Let's hear that into the start of Bover's piano solo. Terrier has an alto sax solo on this one too, and they return with the melody from the 17th measure of what we heard in the beginning, just where Rosen has light tom drumming underneath, to an ending nicely decorated by Bover's piano chimes. Track 7, let's take a break. It's a break for some New Orleans feel and a blues. Rosen gets the beat going and is joined by Woodson with some trumpet improvisations. He works it into the 12-bar blues melody and gets joined by Terrier for a harmonized round. It's a lot of fun, so let's check it out. Terrier's off on a solo from there. Things switch up to a walking bass on the way, driving things along. Woodson, Bover, and Nicholas get solos too, and Rosen gets in on the solo action as well, so let's hear him into the final melody to the end. Track 8 is Althea. This is a really seductive tune with a Latin beat, bass ostinato to get things going, and cool modal changes. The slinky horn melody has 2 10-measure sections, then 2 8-measure sections, and then a final 10 measures. I think you'll really like this one. Switch up to swing for a piano solo from Bover. Let's hear one from Terrier on alto sax on this tune. Follows on trumpet with some topsy-turvy fun lines. It's back to the melody and a fade out over some horn improvisations. And the recording's going to end up with track 9, Quiet Pace, a straight beat tune with Terrier on soprano sax on the melody. Woodson joins in on the way, and on the way there's a 2-beat measure that caught my attention in the second phrase of the sax line. Let's hear it get started. Woodson gets the first solo on this tune with a lot of fluttery figures, and Terrier follows on soprano sax, so let's hear him on this horn a little bit on this tune. gets a piano solo too before the horns are back with the melody to the end. And that's the recording. Olivier Robin shows that he's equally talented as a drummer and composer. His drumming shows a versatility in styles from swing to Latin, a little New Orleans, and delicate touches on ballads. The recording captures his drums clearly without being overpowering on the low end. I was impressed by the variety of his tunes. The structures are unique with evolving musical ideas rather than repeating sections and will give you a lot to enjoy on repeated listens. Hard bop, ballads, blues, Latin, it's a nice mix. My two picks are back to the 60s for the unique meter and groove and the whole mood of Althea. In the solo department, everyone has spots to shine here. Full-toned and fluid trumpet from Woodson, Terrier, with exciting ideas and great tone on both alto and soprano sax. And Bover has great ideas for piano fills and interesting solos of his own. Nicholas nails down the solid ostinatos on bass and makes great changing grooves with Robin, and he has some fine solo spots too.
Yeah, of the three jazz albums we heard tonight, this was probably the one I liked the most. I liked all of them, but this had high energy. I guess I like all that hard bop kind of playing. I tend to take to that. It's a high-energy album, and it's drummer-led, and that usually means that the soloists all get an equal chance to shine, and that's what happens here. Yeah, my ear was particularly drawn by trumpeter Josiah Woodson's tone and athletic playing style in solos. Albert Bover, on piano, provided a bit of a foil with his more relaxed approach, and I was pretty impressed at how he could sound laid back even when he was playing at high speed. It was kind of like he had a kind of, what's the Italian word, sprezzatura to his playing, you know? He has good taste in his chords and solo material, too. It's a lesson we all need to apply to our lives. When we're moving fast, we got to do it in that laid-back style. I thought even with all the great performances, Let's Take a Break stood out with its kind of, I don't know what the name of the rhythm is. It's kind of a Mardi Gras kind of.
It's a New Orleans beat,
Yeah, it's got a name. I don't remember what it is, though. But that rhythm, and I just really found it exciting with everybody soloing over it. I thought the bass by Fabrizio Nicolas stood out in that track. So yeah, this is a record I'm going to have to pick up, I guess.
There you go. You heard it here first on Adult Music, all the way from France. And next week, you know what? We always look out with these drummer-composer records. Drummers are just good composers these days. And so I'm going to have another one next week. We're going to hear a drummer called Benjamin Sands from France as well with his recording Black Seeds. And that's going to be interesting. We're also going to check out the new Positone recording from saxophonist Diego Rivera, Ofrenda, with our favorite Positone rhythm section. And I haven't done vocals in a while, Mike, so we're going to hear the new Samara Joy recording on Verve.
And we really like her, too, so this is perfect. Yeah.
With her septet of musicians there. It's a new step for her. I've heard it a little bit, and I want to listen a little bit more deeply. What have you got lined up on the classical side?
Well, I've got a bit of a theme coming. It's kind of a Halloween sort of theme, like dressing up, being in disguise, as it were. So I've got three albums that are kind of not so straightforward. They're kind of something else than you might expect. And the first is our favorite breakdancing countertenor, Jakub Józef Orlinski. He has a new album called #Let's Baroque. It's recorded with his college buddy Alexander Debich on piano. And they've put together a Baroque program with sort of a rock band. And they kind of give these tunes sort of like a modern studio feel. So it's kind of a bit of what you call crossover. But let's not let that word ruin the experience before we hear the album. Whenever I hear crossover, I'm like, oh, God, I don't want to hear this. But this is a different kettle of fish. We've also got an album called Unplayed Stories in 40 Fingers by the Multi-Piano Ensemble. So that's like as many as 40 fingers on a keyboard at the same time. So that's kind of like, I guess, blown out of proportion, sort of bigger than life sort of thing. And then I've got Couture à Ben, their last album with their cellist and arranger, Raphaël Merlin. And that's kind of sad because he's a really great arranger. He's actually going on to be an arranger. So they're going to replace the cellist, and they will go on. They're not splitting up. But this is an album called Milestones, the Jazz Album. And here, Merlin has used his arranging style to arrange 10, jazz, I don't know if we call them standards, let's say classics, 10 jazz classics for string quartet. So that should be interesting, too.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting program for next week.
It should be fun.
All those recordings we just mentioned, if you want to get started listening early as we do throughout the week, will be up on our episode playlist. That'll be episode 186 next week. You can find that on Deezer, and there'll be a link to it from our Facebook page. Before we sign off this evening, we want to say special thanks, as always, to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. Mike, any final words for this episode to close out?
Well, I go off of this podcast still grooving to that New Orleans Mardi Gras rhythm that we heard on the final album there. Yeah, so I'm in a good place.
That was great.
Yeah.
All right, can't wait to get started listening for next week. And so this has been episode 185 of Adult Music. Until next time, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.